All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, it's no secret that Florida State is upset that they didn't get into the college football playoff, in spite of the fact that they are undefeated. And now reports are surfacing that the Seminoles are weighing their options once again about whether or not that they want to remain in the ACC. To me, and I'm going to touch on this from a lot of different angles, but to me, Florida State not making the college football playoff is a convenient excuse for them to talk about leaving the ACC. And I'm not saying this because I'm trying to bash the Seminoles. Don't get me wrong, because are the Seminoles frustrated about not making the playoff? Yes. And Florida State has every right to be. You're talking about an undefeated team from a Power Five conference that didn't make the playoff while they're watching two teams who do have a loss apiece play, still have a chance to win the national championship. And I've talked about that, on other podcasts. Don't get me wrong. Alabama and Texas definitely deserve to be there, but that doesn't mean that Florida State should still not be frustrated. Now, let's face it, the ACC will never be on the same level football wise as far as competition or finances to either the Big Ten or the SEC. And it irks Florida State about their payout from the ACC in comparison to the schools that are in the Big Ten and the SEC. Now, I've talked about this before with other powerhouse programs, just like it was in the case of USC, Texas, and Oklahoma, just to name a few. And some of the other superpowers in college football that have been jumping ship, sitting back and seeing the Vanderbilts and the Northwesterns of the college football world get more money based off of the conferences that they're affiliated with, it doesn't sit well with those schools. And the blue bloods that are in other conferences have had to accept less money. And I've talked about this before about college football needing revenue sharing. There are other people out there who have talked about, college football needing a commissioner. But the bottom line is you need some semblance of order. And I know that some people are frustrated with the NILs and, the transfer portal, this, that, and the third. I think, the transfer portals for the schools, if you will, to me is a bigger issue than the NILs and the transfer portals for the kids. But nonetheless, Florida State is never going to be happy in the ACC, even if the conference wants to placate them by adding SMU, Cal, and Stanford, which, in my opinion, is the equivalent of putting a small band aid on a wound that requires 50 stitches. I guarantee you that the folks in Tallahassee are going to exhaust all of their options within the next several years to try to get into either the SEC or the Big Ten. But would either conference want them? Does the Big Ten want to expand south? That's going to be a big question right there. And from the SEC standpoint, do they want to expand? And then do they want to add another Florida school? Now, those are going to be two questions that have to be answered by those respective leagues, obviously. But if the Knowles were to leave the ACC, I guarantee you they're not doing it alone because we've heard about other schools in the ACC not being happy with the grant of rights that expires in 2036 or their payouts in comparison to the SEC or the Big Ten. I guarantee you Florida State's not leaving that conference by themselves. For one school that I think could take the jump with a Florida State is Clemson. And, Clemson, has become a football power over the last decade or so under Dabo Sweeney, a pair of national championships. Clemson has had a strong run as far as getting to the college football playoff, finishing in the top 10, you name it. And it's one of those where, just for the sake of argument, having, Clemson and South Carolina in the same conference again, also having, another Florida school if you're the SEC, another power, like Florida State. to bring you to 18, just like the Big Ten is right now. And I'm just talking about this hypothetically, but I guarantee you, within the next 5 years or so, it would not surprise me to see the Knowles either in the SEC or the Big Ten. And I've been saying this for quite some time now, and I'm going to continue to say it. It is only a matter of time before we see a 20 team football conference in college football. And a frustrated Florida State is definitely going to expedite that, because you look at it a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago, did anybody think that it was a possibility that we would see Pac 12 teams go into the Big Ten? And they've added four now to go to 18. 5 years ago, did anybody think it was a possibility, or how many people thought it was a possibility to see Texas and Oklahoma, packing up and going to the SEC? It's the nature of the beast. The SEC's at 16, the Big Ten's at 18. And I've talked about this, just like how we've seen the Pac 12 be destroyed. It's one of those, as long as each conference, the power conferences that is, aren't on the same footing financially, you know what? There's always going to be somebody out there that says, why not us? And they're going to do whatever they have to do to get into that league and get that bigger piece of the pie. So my question is there any way for the ACC to keep Florida State happy? And I just don't see it happening. I know they tried to work on getting, a bigger piece of the pie to the conference champion. It's still not going to equate to the Big Ten money, the guaranteed money from the Big Ten, or the guaranteed money from the ACC. I mean, from the SEC rather. And again, like I said, SMU is a market, the Dallas market, yeah, but bringing them in and bringing Cal and Stanford in ain't going to be enough. I guarantee you, like this, it wouldn't surprise me to see Florida State take a Clemson, take a North Carolina with them out of this league, because UNC doesn't appear to sound happy either. And just for the sake of argument, that's one school that it wouldn't surprise me to see the SEC open their arms to have North Carolina in their league, just to say, hey, we've got North Carolina and Kentucky in our conference basketball wise. So it's a possibility, and it's one of those where a lot of these moves for a lot of these leagues weren't thought of 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. But nonetheless, this is the state of the game. And schools are always going to do whatever they have to do to try to get their biggest payday. So I really think that there is a very strong possibility, and I'm going to go as far as saying 90%, that we see Florida State out of the ACC within the next 5 years. Now, the grant of rights expires for this conference in 2036. I totally get it, but it wouldn't surprise me to see some of those big boosters, alumni from a school like Florida State, pony up the bread to try to work out a deal with the Atlantic Coast Conference to get the Seminoles out of there. And like I said, if they go to another league, they're not going alone. Now, again, this is brought up right now. As you know, obviously, we're getting ready for the college football playoff. Florida State is getting ready for the Orange Bowl against Georgia. They're very frustrated, and they have every right to be. And of course, there's more money coming around the bend next year due to the expanded college football playoff. Nonetheless, schools want that guaranteed conference money. Schools want the biggest payday possible for their respective institution. Florida State, it's one of those where they're happy for the moment. And I say happy is putting on a smile, so to speak, but nonetheless, at some point, they're going to get courted by one of these big leagues, the Big Ten or the SEC. It's just a matter of what brand and what logo that we're going to see at Doak Campbell on that field in the coming years. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, rather, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now, you can check it out. drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.